Hello everyone, welcome back to Adira's Easy Talks. So, as usual, I'm back with Vhse English Revision Series classes. So, I have completed Module 1, Module 2, and now we have Module 3 in our hand. ഈ ഒരു ടോപ്പിക്കിൽ വരുന്നത് റൊമാൻറ്റിക് ആൻഡ് വിക്ടോറിയൻ ഏജ് ആണ്. ഈ മൊഡ്യൂൾ 3 കംപ്ലീറ്റ് ആയിട്ട് ഈ ഒരു സിംഗിൾ സെറ്റ് വീഡിയോയിൽ കവർ ചെയ്യാനായിട്ട് ശ്രദ്ധിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. So, if you're watching my channel for the first time, please do share, subscribe and like my channel. So, without wasting much time, let's look at today's topics. Number 1 is William Wordsworth's ode Intimations of Immortality from Recollections of Early Childhood. And this ode is also known as Ode, Immortality Ode, or Great Ode. The poem was completed in 1804 and was published in the collection Poems in 2 volumes in 1807. The poem was completed in 2 parts, with the first 4 stanzas written among a series of poems composed in 1802 about childhood. The first part of the poem was completed on 27 March 1802 and a copy was provided to Wordsworth's friend and the fellow poet Coleridge, who responded with his own poem Dejection and Ode in April. The fourth stanza of the ode ends with a question, and Wordsworth was finally able to answer it with 7 additional stanzas, which was completed in early 1804. It was first printed as ode in 1807, and it was not until 1815 that it was edited and reworked to the version that is currently known as Ode Intimations of Immortality. The theme is soul's immortality, childhood wonder and pain of growth, the consolations of memory, the beauty and divinity of nature. The poem is an irregular pindaric ode in 11 stanzas. The poem combines aspects of Coleridge's conversation poems, the religious sentiments of the Bible, and the works of Saint Augustine, and aspects of the elegiac and apocalyptic traditions. So the poem is split into 3 movements. The first 4 stanzas discusses death and the loss of youth and innocence. The second 4 stanzas describes how age causes man to lose sight of the divine, and the final 3 stanzas express hope that the memory of the divine will allow us to sympathize with our fellow man. The poem relies on the concept of pre-existence, the idea that the soul existed before the body, to connect children with the ability to witness the divine within nature. As children mature, they become more worldly and lose this divine vision, and the ode reveals Wordsworth's understanding of psychological development that is also found in his poem The Prelude and Tintern Abbey. Wordsworth's praise of the child as the best philosopher was criticized by Coleridge and became the source of later critical discussion. The second work is Kubla, which was written by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. It was completed in 1797 and was published in 1816. It is sometimes given the subtitles A Vision in a Dream, a Fragment. According to Coleridge's preface to Kubla Khan, the poem was composed one night after he experienced an opium-influenced dream after reading a work describing Xanadu, the summer capital of Mongolian dynasty of China found by Kubla Khan, an emperor of Zhou of Yan. Upon waking, he set about writing lines of poetry that came to him from the dream until he was interrupted by a person from Pollock. The poem could not be completed according to its original 200 to 300 line plan, as the interruption caused him to forget the lines. He left it unfinished and kept it for private readings for his friends until 1860, when, at the prompting of Lord Byron, it was published. The first stanza of the poem describes Kubla Khan's pleasure dome built alongside a sacred river fed by a powerful fountain. The second stanza of the poem is the narrator's response to the power and effect of a Abyssinian maid's song, which enraptures him but leaves him unable to act on her inspiration unless he could hear her once again. Together they form a comparison of creative power that does not work with nature and creative power that is harmonious with nature. The third and final stanza shifts to a first-person perspective of the speaker, detailing his sighting of a woman playing a dulcimer, and if he could revive her song, he could fill the pleasure dome with music. He concludes by describing a hypothetical audience reaction to the song in the language of religious ecstasy. Next, Ode to a Nightingale. It was written between 26 April and 18 May 1890. It was based on weather conditions and similarities between images in the poem and those in a letter sent to Fanny Brown on May Day. It has 8 stanzas and uh, in each stanza it contains 10 lines, so it make out the total of 18 lines. It is metrically variable lines. Longest of 1819 odes, it was composed in a single day, and the rhyme scheme of the poem is AB, CDE, DCE, written either in the garden of the Spaniards in Hampstead, London, or according to Keats' friend Charles Armitage Brown, under a plum tree in the garden of Keats' house at Wentworth Place, also in Hamden. So ഇത്രയാണ് ഈ ഒരു വർക്കിന്റെ ബേസിക് ആയിട്ടുള്ള കാര്യം എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. ഓർത്തിരിക്കുക, കീറ്റ്സിന്റെ 1819 ഓഡ്സിൽ പെടുന്ന ഒരു ഓടാണ് ഓഡ് ടു എ നൈറ്റിംഗൽ എന്നുള്ളത് വളരെ പെക്യുലർ ആണ്. അതുപോലെ ഏതൊക്കെ ഓഡ്സ് ആണ് ആ ഒരു കാറ്റഗറി ലിസ്റ്റ് ഓഫ് കാറ്റഗറീസിൽ വരുന്നതെന്ന് ഓർത്തിരിക്കുക. അടുത്ത സ്ലൈഡിൽ നമ്മൾ പറയുന്നുണ്ട്. And according to Brown, a nightingale had built its nest near the house that he shared with Keats in the spring of 1890. It soon became one of his 1819 odes and was first published in Annals of the Fine Arts the following July. Ode to a Nightingale is a personal poem which describes Keats' journey into the state of negative capability. The tone of the poem rejects the optimistic pursuit of pleasure found within Keats' earlier poems, and instead it explores the theme of nature, transience and mortality, the latter being particularly relevant to Keats. The poem ends with an acceptance that pleasure cannot last and that death is an inevitable part of life. In the poem, Keats imagines the loss of the physical world and sees himself dead as a sword over which the nightingale sings. The contrast between the immortal nightingale and the mortal man sitting in his garden is made all the more acute by an effort of the imagination. The presence of weather is noticeable in the poem, as spring came early in 1819, bringing nightingales all over the heath. The exact date of Ode to a Nightingale, Ode on Indolence, then Ode on Melancholy, Ode on a Grecian Urn is unknown, as Keats dated all as May 1890. However, he worked on the 4 poems together and there is a unity in both their stanza forms and their theme. Next, Ode to West Wind by Shelley. So it was written by Percy Bysshe Shelley in 1819 in Cassenwood near Florence, Italy. It was originally published in 1820 by Charles Ollier in London as part of the collection Prometheus Unbound, a lyrical drama in 4 acts with other poems. Shelley wanted his message of reform and revolution spread, and the wind becomes the troop of spreading the word of change throughout the poet-prophet figure. Some also believe that the poem was written in response to the loss of his son William, which was born to Mary Shelley in 1819. The poem allegorizes the role of the poet as the voice of change and revolution. So ഈ ഒരു poem എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് അപ്പോൾ ആ ടൈമിലെ പൊളിറ്റിക്കൽ ആയിട്ടുള്ള സിറ്റുവേഷനുമായിട്ട് കണക്റ്റഡ് ആണ്. അതാണ് ഇവിടെ ഈ ഒരു 2 ലൈനിൽ നമുക്ക് വായിക്കാനായിട്ട് പറ്റുന്നത്. അതായത് ഹിസ് മെസ്സേജ് ഓഫ് റിഫോം ആൻഡ് റെവല്യൂഷൻ സ്പ്രെഡ്, the wind became the troop of spreading the word of change through the പോയറ്റ് പ്രൊഫറ്റ് ഫിഗർ. സോ അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ റെവല്യൂഷണറി ഐഡിയാസ് ആണ് അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ പോയത്തിലൂടെ സ്പ്രെഡ് ആവുന്നതെന്ന് വളരെ വ്യക്തമായിട്ട് പറയുന്നുണ്ട്. പ്ലസ് അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ പേഴ്സണൽ ആസ്പെക്ട്സ് ഈ ഒരു പോയത്തിൽ റീസൺ ആയിട്ട് വരുന്നുണ്ട്. ആൻഡ് ഹി മറ്റൊരു കാര്യം, ആ ഒരു ടൈമിൽ ഹിസ്റ്റോറിക്കൽ ആയിട്ടുള്ള മറ്റൊരു കാര്യം കൂടി ഈ ഒരു പോയത്തിൽ അഫക്ട് ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. അതായത് പീറ്റർലോ മസേക്കർ ഓഫ് ഓഗസ്റ്റ് 1819 അതിന്റെ തീമും കൂടെ ഇൻക്ലൂഡ് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഇത്രയും പവർഫുൾ ആയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു ഓഡ് അദ്ദേഹം എഴുതുന്നത് എന്ന് നമുക്ക് മനസ്സിലാക്കാനായിട്ട് സാധിക്കും. His other poems written at the same time, The Mask of Anarchy, Prometheus Unbound, and England in 1819, take up these same themes of political change, revolution, and role of the poet. It is a 5 stanza poem of 14 lines each, and the rhyme scheme is ABA, BCB, CDC, DED, and EE. Then The Prison of Chillon by Byron. It is a 392-line narrative poem written in 1816. It chronicles the imprisonment of a Genovese monk Francois Bonivard from 1532 to 1536. On 22nd June 1816, Lord Byron and his contemporary and friend Shelley were sailing on Lake Geneva, referred to as Lac Clement, the French name throughout the poem, and stopped to visit the prison of Chillon. After touring the castle and walking through the dungeon in which Bonivard was imprisoned, Byron was inspired by Bonivard's story and he composed the sonnet of Chillon. Because of the terrestrial rainfall, Byron and his companion rested at a hotel in Ouchy following their tour. In late June or early July, several early drafts and copies present conflicting dates. Byron composed the longer fable. The work was probably completed by 2nd July 1816. The Prison of Chillon was first published as The Prisoner of Chillon and Other Poems by John Murray on 5th December 1816. The work's theme and images follow those of a typical poem by Lord Byron. The protagonist is an isolated figure and brings a strong will to bear against great suffering. He seeks solace in the beauty of nature. Then Ulysses. Ulysses is a poem in blank verse. Tennyson completed the poem on 20th October 1833, but it was not published until 1842 in his second collection of poems. It is a dramatic monologue. Facing old age, mythical hero Ulysses describes his discontent and restlessness upon returning to his kingdom Ithaca after his far-ranging travels. Despite his reunion with his wife Penelope and his son Telemachus, Ulysses yearns to explore again. The adventure of Odysseus were first recorded in Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, and Tennyson draws on Homer's narrative in the poem. Ulysses as resolute and heroic, admiring him for the determination to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. The poem's insistent iambic pentameter is often interrupted by spondes. Observing their burdensome prosodic effect, the poet Matthew Arnold remarked, "These 3 lines by themselves take up nearly as much time as a whole book of the Iliad." In a 1929 essay, T.S. Eliot called Ulysses a perfect poem. An analogy of Ulysses is found in Eliot's Geronton. Both poems are narrated by an aged man contemplating life's end. The Lotus Eater. It is published in Tennyson's 1832 poetry collection called Poems. It was inspired by his trip to Spain with his close friend Ada Hallam, where they visited the Pyrenees Mountain. The poem describes a group of mariners whom upon eating the lotus are put into an altered state and isolated from the outside world. The title and concept derives from the lotus eaters in Greek mythology. Then the Scholar Gypsy. The Scholar Gypsy was written in 1853. It is based on 17th century Oxford story found in Joseph Glanvill's The Vanity of Dogmatization. It has often been called one of the best and popular of Arnold's poem and is also familiar to music lovers through Ralph Vaughan Williams' choral work and Oxford Elegy, which sets line from this poem and from its companion piece, the Tiresias. The poem is filled with vivid description of the countryside around Oxford. What the poem actually offers is a charm of relaxation or a holiday from serious aims and exacting business, and what the scholar gypsy really symbolizes Victorian poetry. Vehicles are often of explicit intellectual and moral intentions, but unable to be, in essence, anything but relaxing and anodyne. This was said by F.R. Lewis. Then Homer animates, Shakespeare animates in its poor way. I think Zora and Rustum animates the scholar gypsy at best awakens a pleasing melancholy. But this is not what we want. The complaining millions of men, darkened in labor and pain, what they want is something to animate and ennoble them, not merely to access to their melancholy or grace to their dream. This is what Matthew Arnold talked about the work The Scholar Gypsy. Then Dover Beach. This is a lyrical poem. This was published in 1867 collection New Poems. It's a dramatic monologue lamenting the loss of true Christian faith in England during the mid 1800s. However, surviving notes indicates its composition may have begun as early as 1849. The most likely date is 1851. The title, locale, and subject of the poem descriptive opening lines is the shore of the English ferry port of Dover in Kent, facing Calais in France at the Strait of Dover, the narrow part of the English Channel where Arnold spent his honeymoon in 1851. Many of the beaches in this part of England are made of small stones or pebbles rather than sand, and Arnold described the sea ebbing over the stone as a grating roar. Then Andrea del Sarto, also called the Faultless Painter. It is published in his 1855 poetry collection Men and Women. It is a dramatic monologue, a form of poetry for which he is famous about the Italian painter Andrea del Sarto. The poem is in blank verse and mainly uses iambic pentameter. The poem was inspired by Andrea del Sarto, who is originally named Andrea di Anglo, a Renaissance artist. The historical Del Sarto was born in Florence, Italy on July 16, 1486 and died in Florence, Italy on September 29, 1530. Del Sarto was the pupil of Pero di Cosimo, and he was influenced by Raphael, Leonardo da Vinci, and Fra Bartolomeo. He began to produce work in 1506. His work stemmed from traditional Quattrocento painting. Del Sarto was revered for his art. Some called his Andrea Zenza Irori the Unerring. In his poem Browning Seeds, the painting are free of errors, but that alone does not make a piece of art special or evocative. The poem is based on biographical material by Giorgio Vasari. Then The Pied Beauty. It's a curtail sonnet. It was written in 1877 but not published until 1918 when it was included as part of the collection Poems of Gerald Manley Hopkins. It is a kind of rhyme of praise to God that marvels at the varied world that God creates. The poem sees God's majesty not just in nature's sheer variety, but also in labor of humankind and in the abstract categories that people use to understand their experience of the world. The poem was written in 1877 but not published until 1918 as showcases Hopkins' trademark linguistic incentiveness. Then on the knocking at the gate in Macbeth, which is written by Dickens. Essay in Shakespearean criticism, first published in the London Magazine in October 1823 as an item in Dickens's series of notes from the pocket book of a late opium eater. It has been called Dickens's finest single critical piece and one of the most penetrating critical footnotes in our literature. Commentators who are dismissed of Dickens's literary criticism in general make an exception for his essay on Macbeth. The essay concerns Act 2, Scene 3 in the tragedy of Macbeth, in which the murder of King Duncan by Macbeth and Lady Macbeth is succeeded by Macduff and Lennox knocking at the gate of the castle. The knocking ends Act 2, Scene 2 and opens Act 3, Scene 3, the Porter scene. Dickens wrote that for him, the knocking always has a pronounced effect. It reflected back upon the murder a peculiar awfulness and a depth of solemnity. Dickens could not account rationally for this response according to the then accepted canons of literary criticism, and he proceeded through his essay to venture a more psychological interpretation than had previously been applied to Shakespeare. The essay foreshadows the psychological approaches of much later criticism. Dickens's biographer Horace Ainsworth Eaton called the essay penetrating and philosophic, adding that Dickens in his essay produced conclusions as significant as anything in Coleridge or Hazlitt. Dickens also views his response to the play in reference to another of his classical essay, On Murder, considered as one of the fine arts. Charles Lamb. In our syllabus, we had two essays written by Charles Lamb. One is Oxford in Vacation, the other is Dream Children Everywhere. Oxford in Vacation is taken from the Essays of Elia, first published as one volume in 1823, and it first appeared in London Magazine, and it is written under the pseudonym Elia. Then Dream Children is an essay which is included in Essays of Elia, which is first published in London Magazine in 1823. The second volume, Last Essays of Elia, is issued in 1833 by the publisher Edward Moxon. Dream Children is a personal essay. Lamb presents a character and incidents from his own life, the sketches of his grandmother, Miss Field, his brother, John Lamb, his sister, Mary Lamb, his tragic love affairs with Anne Simmons. But Lamb also plays with facts and fiction and transforms the real into the literary. The last one, the importance of being earnest. So this play, its subtitle is A Trivial Comedy of Serious People. It was written by Oscar Wilde. A farcical comedy, the work mocks the culture and manners of Victorian society, relying on satire and a comical resolution to make the mockery more palpable to us. First performed on 14th February 1895 at St. James Theatre in London. The characters include Jack Worthing, Algernon Moncrief, Gwendolen Fairfax, Lady Augusta Bracknell, Cecily Cardew, then Miss Prism, the Reverend Canon Chasuble, Lane Merriman, etc. The themes include triviality as a satire of Victorian society. So by this we come to the end of the VHS English series module 3. So in the next class we'll again meet with module 4. Thank you.